Kia ora, I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly. Today on The Detail, the young Samoan woman caught up in the 12-day war in the Middle East and her compatriot who helped get her out.
The only safe way for her to exit is is go through via Egypt. So they had to drive in a bus, cross the border, go through, drive all the way down to the south up to Cairo.
How a planned flight home turned into a 5-day ordeal in bomb shelters, a tense bus trip over the border through several checkpoints, and 2 days stuck at Cairo airport. It took an ambassador in Belgium, the government back home, and experts on the ground to get her to safety. Plus,
we don't know if literally hell on earth is going to open up around this clinic or this hospital.
It's a very tricky business to exfiltrate or extract or save New Zealanders abroad in other countries' jurisdictions.
Repatriations, evacuations, relocations. We look at the difficult, dangerous job of getting people out of war zones and the security firms that help.
Well, then we will try to help you do your essential work.
First to Jerusalem, where Vincent Schmidt is a security officer for the United Nations. He was a police officer in Samoa before he was recruited to work for the UN in East Timor and later to war zones of Eastern Europe and Iraq.
We are in a team of 8 of us, so we're looking after the UN ambassador in Jerusalem. So wherever he's traveling, we just provide escorts or provide protection for him. And right now everything is on hold and see where this one's going to head up to. Because during 2 weeks ago, for 12 days, there were non-stop rockets flying in from Iran and other countries. So it was a challenging week, 12 days.
And during that time, what were you doing? You were looking after the UN ambassador at that time?
Not really. I think the main thing that we're working on it is just for our safety. We are close by where the assigned location, especially safe rooms, bomb shelters and stuff like that. And also we are very informed with the local authority as well. And we would get the text there's a launching coming in, and it takes you 2 minutes just to get ready. Everything's informed, and we have an app just to monitor where exactly the rockets were landed. And then from there you can see, is it coming to Jerusalem? Was it going to Tel Aviv? Was it going up north or south? And then from there you can see the big pictures of exactly where the impacts will. But there's a lot of rockets that have been intercepted on top of Jerusalem.
During that time, where were you?
I was at home, and also I was still working out with our staff. Some of them want to leave, and we just help out just to evacuate them through the borders and stuff like that. But unfortunately, this is what we assigned for. This is what we paid for, just to be here. And I'm just waiting for the last call. When are we gonna leave, or are we gonna be still here?
A Samoan citizen has returned home safely from Israel amid airspace closures and unrest in the Middle East. Bolino Faleva'ai from Samoa's scientific research organisation had been in Israel for a 10-month agricultural research training.
Tell me about Bolino Faleva'ai. How were you involved with getting her out of Israel?
She was attending one of her scholarship down south, close to the Dead Sea. So I added her on the group of Samoans. They live in Israel. She completed her study, and she was supposed to fly out on a Monday, but the war broke off on a Friday. And when the war started, the old airspace is closing.
So what sort of contact did you have with her over those days?
Honestly, this is not the first time I've been helping our people when they got stranded here. There was a couple of almost 22 of them were here when this war started in 2023. So I have I have contacts, and I have my own kind of procedures. So I reach out to our ambassador in Brussels, Belgium. But she's the one that she cover all these areas, and I just inform her, hey, this is what's been happening, and we have Lino here. We are looking for how we can let her out because everything is closed down. So then I think our Samoan ambassador in Belgium reached out to the government, and that's where we all came in together, and they create a a WhatsApp group so we all can, make sure all the information that we need, and also with Lino, just to get her updates from the security point of view, and also from Samoa and how the government they are helping, and just want to make sure like she's well informed and be alert of what's been happening around.
In those 3 days, because her flight home was cancelled, I'm reading that she actually had to go to a bomb shelter.
That's a normal when it comes to within these 12 days, because if the rockets comes in, the only safe place for you just run to the bomb shelter. I think everyone's in the country, they will all react the same.
But if Israel is a no-fly zone, how did you get her out?
So we were looking of evacuate her through Jordan or Egypt. Those are the two options that we look at it. But so that's when I think the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they in contact with New Zealand and Australia, and I think UK as well, as far as I know. So whatever evacuation flight that's coming from Jordan or any other places, just keep us posted, and then we can make sure Paulino can cross one of the borders so she can catch those flights. And also the school found out like the only safe way for her to exit is like is go through via Egypt. So they had to drive in a bus, cross the border, drive all the way down to the south up to Cairo. We were looking for whatever possible earliest way so we can let her exit Israel. And Egypt was the right place in the right time. So that's where she took that route. And I think from Egypt, she spent like almost 2 days there. And she flew to Dubai to Australia to Fiji, and then she's home.
From where she was staying, so what, she just got on a bus?
No, the school bus they arranged, because all the students together, so they were all evacuated on the same time.
In the bus?
Yeah, in the bus. Yeah, in order for you to cross the border, you had to go through the bus ride. I think it's like about almost 4 to 5 hours, the whole bus ride, because there's a lot of when you go to Egypt, you had to expect a lot of checkpoints on the way, and it's going to slow things down. So
it must have been pretty tense for her.
I think so, but it's so good. Like she was, we talk and just keep encouraging her, like just keep your faith. And when she arrived in Cairo at the airport, like she was always, when she get the Wi-Fi, she get in touch with me, and then she said like, "Hey, Vinny, I'm here. I'm good." And since a couple of flights that got cancelled, a couple of minutes before she has to board the flight, but because of the checkpoints, got the delay, a miscommunication from the school, and yeah, there was a lot of challenges that she faced during her routes back.
Imagine you're running a hospital near the front line in Syria under the old Assad regime. Soldiers are just a few hundred metres away and closing in. You've got minutes to get 100 workers out, and a doctor is refusing to leave. That's one of many life and death scenarios Relief Aid head Mike Seawright has had to tackle.
We're saying, right, your truck is leaving in 15 minutes and there's no option for you to stay. And in this particular case, this required my team, you segment the team into different sectors, logistics team, medical team. My medical team leader was talking to their team, and one of them was refusing. One of the doctors is saying, look, for very good reason, we need to be here. There'll be patients turning up if this fighting comes any closer. I'm saying to the guy, you don't get an option here. You are relocating no matter what you think. Get on that truck. You're putting other lives at risk here. We'll come back as soon as we can. But at this point, we don't know if literally hell on earth is going to open up around this clinic or this hospital.
And did he?
Yeah, but that was only because we put a little bit of authority behind the decision.
If you had half an hour, everyone just got in a vehicle and sped away?
Well, this is where it gets really complicated, and it has to be well telegraphed in advance. You've got a combination of regional staff, so staff that live in other parts of Syria in this case. You've got local staff who live literally in the area that we're working, and then you've got all these other practical considerations such as money and medical files. In this particular case, we had done our job in advance to make sure there was no expectation of evacuation of those staff members that were physically located, that lived in the village and town that we were working. So it was kind of like, here, guys, here's your salaries. You don't need to work anymore. We would suggest that you make your own way out of this area because it's getting dangerous. But for all those other staff members that we had brought to the hospital, we relocated them about 15 kilometres away from this area. And then once the situation, which took a couple of weeks, settled down, we brought them back in and restarted the clinic. This in itself was a difficult decision because the front line hadn't changed that far from where it got to. And, literally within minutes we'd have the hospital overrun again, or the risk of it being overrun.
With teams in hotspots like Ukraine, Afghanistan and Gaza, it's not just the lives of workers and patients at risk, it is their details, their records.
We've got considerations of having to move or destroy patient files so that the individuals that have received treatment in our facility are not identifiable by the occupying force, in this case the Assad forces as it was at the time, because anyone, including our staff and patients that received humanitarian assistance in Syrian opposition-controlled areas was subject to detention, to interrogation, torture in some cases, and execution in others, including our own staff members.
In all of these places that you're in, what would be the riskiest at the moment where you're sort of on high alert and ready to go at any moment?
It's a good question, Sharon, and maybe the way I can illustrate the answer to that is, and this relates to our national teams, not our internationals. When we started in Gaza, we started with a team of 9 in the north. We subsequently created a second team that's continuing to deliver water in central and southern Gaza. Our team in the north, of the 9, 7 are now dead and 2 are severely injured. So even our team in Ukraine and our team in Syria, they tell us to be careful in Gaza. Even places like Ukraine, which in itself is extremely dangerous, they think Gaza is more dangerous than there.
And so if you needed to get team members out of Gaza, how difficult is that at the moment and how dangerous is it?
The ability to get injured patients or humanitarian workers, national Gaza staff, in this case, across the border into Egypt is extremely difficult. Not only do you have to worry about getting them out of Gaza, and all the medical considerations that would entail, but you also have to consider where they're going to go for treatment after that. And if we look, putting humanitarian workers aside, if you look at where the severely injured are coming, civilians that are coming out of Gaza are going to, they're ending up in places like Europe, the Arab states and the US. So not only do you have to negotiate a transit through Egypt, but you have to negotiate potential medical referrals into one of those countries, along with the visas and consular requirements that would involve as well.
We are today announcing the deployment of a C-130 Hercules aircraft to the region to stand ready to assist if needed.
Winston Peters here, giving the government's response to the Middle East crisis a couple of weeks ago.
The fact remains that reliable airspace reopenings across the region could be weeks away, and options are extremely limited while military attacks continue.
Retired Auckland University Professor Stephen Hoadley says it is a delicate diplomatic business.
They are hosts to New Zealanders, but they don't expect that to be abused by New Zealand flying in and moving around the countryside, ignoring local sensitivities.
In the case of the Middle East, of course, a lot of those countries were in a no-fly zone. So how does that affect the logistics of it?
Well, obviously, you don't fly into a no-fly zone. You fly as near as you can. Now, look, the problem with the Middle East is that New Zealand has no direct diplomatic post in Israel. It's, in fact, represented from Ankara in Turkey. And so New Zealand would depend on local New Zealand business people, perhaps the local honorary consul, might be Israelis, they might be Palestinians who have associated themselves with New Zealand and provide information services to the government for a very small fee. There'd be other ways in which New Zealand would work with their Australian counterparts, their British counterparts, their Canadian counterparts, maybe their American counterparts, to do us a favor and look after certain individuals. And of course, they would expect us to reciprocate. It becomes political, it becomes very diplomatic in the sense that like-minded countries, particularly the democratic English-speaking five, will help each other's citizens on request, and particularly for New Zealand, fills the gap because New Zealand's diplomatic footprint is not as dense as the larger countries' footprints are.
So there's a lot of people involved in the process of getting one or two or, numerous people out.
It's very labor intensive. Let me give you an example. There is a consular division in Wellington. Its staff may be 24 people approximately. But if there's an emergency and a lot of New Zealanders are stuck in, for example, a natural disaster or civil war, they will call in volunteers, and those volunteers will all then start telephoning all the New Zealanders in the area and ask them if they're okay, if they need assistance. And do they know of other New Zealanders who are not registered? About half of New Zealanders never bother to register if they're in a foreign country. And of course, they're more vulnerable, more at risk, because the MFAT cannot contact them. Their families can't contact them often. And then the families will ring up the Minister of Foreign Affairs with desperate to contact their son, daughter, brother, sister in a war zone, and this then puts a lot of pressure on the minister, the ministry, the bureaucrats, and others, and they will then try to work with their counterparts in, say, Gaza, in Israel, in Iran, or other places where there is real risk of injury to New Zealanders.
In the most recent situation, I think the Defence Force plane was sent over, but we didn't hear so much. I mean, do they have to be secretive about where they are and then, getting people to that point?
You have to ask them whether they require secrecy, but there probably was just uncertainty. That is, they may not be certain how close they can get to, say, Iran. Can they get to Turkey, for example? Can they get to Syria? Well, no, Syria is a pretty troubled place. Probably not. So they have to figure out, file a fight plan. The Defense Force has to be sure there is security, that they're not going to be at risk of surface-to-air missiles from, some Russian trigger-happy missile officer. They have to solve the logistics of refueling and food for the crew and whoever else is aboard. And they have to then figure out where they can marry up the plane with the New Zealanders. That is, the New Zealanders probably would have to move out by car, bus, or foot from Iran through Azerbaijan. We don't have diplomatic relations with Azerbaijan, and that's where an airliner was shot down by a nearby Russian surface-to-air missile. And so all of these are risks to the Defense Force. They have to minimize those risks, work through the details, get permission to land, pay the landing fee, make sure that the diplomatic niceties and courtesies are all observed. There might be expenses involved as well. And by the way, the extracted New Zealanders are expected to pay some share of the cost of their extraction. So all of these add up to the fact that the minister is simply not in a position to answer all questions in great detail, because a lot of it is unfolding hour by hour, day by day.
And it's a costly process, very costly. Mike Seawright of Relief Aid says it can cost $1 million to get an injured Kiwi home. Another side of the evacuation, repatriation, rescue industry are the private security companies. James Robertson is a director of International SOS based in Sydney. It has numerous clients in the Middle East.
It's been a really intense period of time, and of course that came on the back of the India-Pakistan war, so a pretty hectic period of time for us. So we do a couple of main things. The first is the intelligence side of things. So we have a global threat monitoring team that is scanning the environment, right? So looking at missile activity, border closures, militancy, in other contexts, crime and protests. And so they're doing that in a mixture of ways. They're doing that online, but also using field sources. So networks of people that can liaise with us on the ground, who can tell us, actually, this route to the airport in Tel Aviv is closed, or this border crossing out of Iran is too busy, go to another one. So that's the intelligence side. And then we provide what we call assistance. And this is basically providing help to people who are affected. So if you're a New Zealand company and you had staff, say, in Israel, we may well have evacuated your people out of that country. And we did that in a few ways. Some people moved by land across the border to Jordan. And then we're able to get out eventually from Amman. We even moved people by sea, actually, from Israel to Cyprus. And then we helped some other clients with staff just to remain, for example, in Israel and stay safe in a fixed position during the height of the missile exchange. So, yeah, quite a few different things.
What's been the most difficult operation that you've been involved in?
There have been a few. I mean, the operations in the Middle East in the last few weeks have been very difficult for some people. Some of the challenges have been helping people to evacuate out of Iran. We have clients, Australian, Kiwi clients who have staff in that country, maybe because they're doing work or because they have Iranian citizenship or family. And of course, we have to comply with global sanctions, which means it's a bit harder to collect information or to help people on the ground there. So that was a real challenge to get accurate information about, say, what's happening with panic buying in Tehran, or what's happening with fuel shortages on the way to the Armenian border. The other part is the assistance. So when you're trying to coordinate lots of different clients, each of whom has a different risk tolerance, a different appetite for uncertainty and friction, I suppose I'd say, trying to coordinate them all together to make a response on the ground can be pretty tricky.
What you mean? Bring a disparate group of people together to get them
exactly right.
on transport, so you can safely get them over the border.
Exactly right. So you might have people who've been operating, say, in Iraq for many years, and they're used to operating in a high or extreme risk environment. But then you might have some visiting managerial staff who are not used to that. And you're trying to move them, say, by ground to Baghdad, for example, and get a flight out, a chartered air movement out. But you've got to account for all of these different, I guess, clients and levels of experience and how much they can, I suppose, help themselves in the first instance. So we would always say that anything that you can do to potentially move yourself to an emergency assembly area that we designate, or where you can move quickly whilst there might still be commercial airline operations going before you potentially have to take a longer, maybe less pleasant ground movement, when the airspace gets closed. So those are some of the considerations.
Are there any countries in the world that you say don't go?
Well, we're a bit different to a government. We are trying to facilitate the safe travel of our clients. And if you have business in an extreme risk environment, say a Somalia, or an Afghanistan, well, then we will try to help you do your essential work, and we will provide tools and techniques around communications and tracking and information to help you reduce and avoid the risk. So we try hard not to say don't go. Some of our clients are in the media industry. Of course, they're going in when other people are going out. Some of our clients are NGOs and development professionals. They're going in when other people are going out, or they're staying there. So we rate every country in the world from insignificant up to extreme. But even in extreme risk locations, you have people going in.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. Alexia Russell produced this episode. William Saunders engineered it. Thanks to James Robertson, Mike Seawright, Stephen Hoadley and Vincent Schmidt. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Mā te wā.